I've never done an intro before, actually. This is the first episode, so I'm going to be like...
Okay, well, there you go.
Welcome to, it's called the Brain Map Podcast.
Nice.
This is Dr. Natalie Rosin, who I'm joined with today. PhD kind of doctor?
Yeah, I have an EDD in curriculum instruction. Basically kind of a fancy way just to say, looking at ways to help kids learn better. So,
Sweet.
Which is kind of the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. And you studied biology? Or?
I did. My undergrad, my bachelor's degree is in biology, and I got that from the University of Iowa, and then stayed there, and kind of actually decided that I wanted to do science education, and then actually went out and taught for a little bit. And then decided that there were lots of ways to actually help kids learn and do better than what they do. And so that then I went back to school at Loyola to get my doctorate. So
this one's pretty good.
Okay.
How has teaching science changed since you started?
Oh, that's a really fantastic question to actually start with, because this fall will actually be my 31st year of teaching, and I feel like there's so many different things. When I went to school, it was kind of like, these are different options that you have. You could, have students work in groups. You could have students kind of work by themselves. Experiencing different ways that people would actually interact, like in a lab setting or in a research facility or something like that, just to be able to give students the opportunity to kind of feel like what that would be like. And I feel like over time, those kind of things still work, but the way in which you want to bring topics to them, at the very beginning, I taught with a book, and it was very much like read the chapter, and all the knowledge was coming from one particular source, which we know in science is definitely not the way that you want to get your information at all. And so I think one of the things that's actually evolved is just this idea that you can pull knowledge and bring knowledge into your classroom, whether it's you bringing it in, students bringing it in with their own interest to different things that they see on TV or movies, or they've listened to in a podcast, or research that they've actually done, or things that may be happening to people in their neighborhood or their family members. And I feel like that's kind of one of the big things. It's also one of the challenges, because it's, you kind of have standards in places that you need to go and things that you need to make sure that students learn. But it's also, I think, kind of a neat way to weave in what, is memorable and what can help you build relationships with students much more easily than what a book can do. I also think one of the things that has actually changed is just the sheer amount of discoveries that have happened in science since before 2000 when I started teaching. And the the way to actually be able to say, if students have questions, like, I don't know the answer, like, that is not something that I know a lot about, but I'm willing to go and see, like, if this is something that you're interested, can I find you a YouTube channel? Can I find you a documentary or those things? So I think it becomes more tailored and more personalized, as much or as little as, students will want it, based on what their experiences are. Because not every kid comes into your classroom looking for everything to do with science, and then there are kids who just can't get enough of that, and they could spend all day in your classroom if they didn't need to go to other classes. So I think that those are probably some of those things that have actually changed. And then I don't know, just kind of on like an outside of classroom thing, is just the idea that there's so many different ways to kind of funnel that. So there are, different clubs, whether it's engineering club or environmental club or science Olympiad, so which is more of a competition, club, to be able to continue to harness those interests, which we didn't have when I first started teaching.
Yeah, clubs I think are definitely a big help. I think technology also plays a big part, like you said, with not only what like the new advances are, but also a lot of things the past decade have switched to like Chromebooks, right? Like everybody has a Chromebook. And I remember in third or fourth, I think even fifth grade, like maybe we had them on like carts and stuff, but we didn't have our own Chromebooks that we did our own work on. So that's like a big thing that I think almost all kids in the education system right now, like it feels like they've always had that. When I know that like that's kind of a new thing that came in, which I think is super interesting. But yeah, clubs I think are also super important. Science Olympiad was definitely one of my favorite things about St. Charles North High School, and then eventually becoming the president of it was like really cool, like, like wow, like, this is actually something I'm really involved in, to the point where I'm leading the new people, and we're only getting like better and bigger, and we're only getting smarter and smarter kids and brains, and we're just doing better and better.
I think that's, Science Olympiad is such a huge, I feel like it has such a huge following. I mean, for being relatively new.
Yeah, and it grew.
Yes, huge. So, and I mean, when you guys compete, that it's not like, oh, we're competing just in like biology, chemistry, physics, and earth or environmental, that every year you get all of these different facets that, students who are actually in that club competing go and learn about. So go and learn about on their own, or, accessing different resources maybe in or out of the building, which I also think is another thing that kind of ties back into your one-on-one Chromebooks, that technology piece makes accessing information so easy to do. Like, you don't have to go in, to a library, look it up in the card catalog, go get a book, check it out, and that it's all, kind of instantly there. Now it's just about, looking at what sources might be good or reliable, in order to help you get what you need.
Yeah, get the credible information, because otherwise you can just shoot a prompt into Google, or, a lot of people do AI now.
Yeah.
Which I think is useful, but it's a lot of misinformation too. I will constantly get, like, Google AI, for example.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all. Like, when they added that, I was like, oh, how do I, like, remove this? Like, it'll be the first thing that responds, and a lot of the times it's incorrect, whether it's the fact that's actually incorrect, or sometimes they'll include photos of just, like, the wrong thing.
Yes.
And it's a little annoying.
It is sometimes. I am glad that there's somebody else who kind of finds it. I wish, like, it is, like, there was an on-off switch to be able to have that. And I feel like sometimes it's a great place to start, but there is. I feel like that's AI kind of adapting and, like, evolving, if you were in, as it takes in more information too. And so, but again, with any new technological advance, I think it'll be time, and I think it'll be interesting to see where it is, a year from now, 2 to 5 years from now, because I think that's kind of what the next wave is, and then just how we use it, how we use it responsibly, and hopefully, if it is, like, it ends up being a good and powerful tool for us to be able to access. So,
because it is really powerful, but I think it can be a little too used, I think. I think people resort to it too quickly.
Yes.
Is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's got, yes, you can do all sorts of things with it. You can lesson plan with it. You can write college recommendation letters with it.
Right.
And that's not personally where I am. I want to be able to, I want to be able to, like, personalize things for students. But, it's good sometimes just for, like, here's, kind of a quick summary of stuff, but you still do have to sift through what's real and, what it's not pulling that's correct.
Surprisingly, I found myself not using AI almost at all my senior year, which I thought was interesting, because my junior year I took a push, and for that one I definitely used a lot of AI, not to write, like, my responses, but in the sense that it was really easy it made it easier to, like, find, like, sources and examples of a thing, like, in a historical context, like examples of, a revolution that the US, almost won, or, like, examples of this. Like, it was a lot easier to find stuff like that through AI. But I know that this past senior year, even though I had, like English 101, which I think was one of my favorite classes.
Awesome.
I didn't really find myself using a lot of AI, which I thought was kind of, like, it's not like I pledged myself, like, in a silent, like, oh, I'm not going to use it this year.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of ended up not doing it.
You just didn't use it, so.
I mean, I didn't really want to be super, like subject to that the need for it, you know what I mean? Or to get too used to it.
Sure.
But it's not like a thing that I went out of my way to try not to do. I just ended up not.
Just who you are as a person. And so, nice. Good. That was a good question.
Thank you. The next question, this one's kind of interesting.
Okay.
If you had unlimited resources and could design the perfect science classroom or lab experience, what would that look like?
Oh, probably a lot different.
Like a fume hood? I think we already have one, but maybe more fume hoods.
Yes, I would feel like more fume hoods. I also feel like way more experiential. I think that one of the things that we could do a lot better with, and we have pockets of where I feel like it works in our school, is really forming those partnerships with people who are in our community. And it could be parents who happen to have, you know, maybe not access to resources, but like this is what they actually do for a living. Or there is, you know, like there's wastewater treatment facilities, or there's, you know, community gardens, or these things that I feel like, you know, there are probably pockets of our students that know how those work, or you know how to get involved with that, but there are probably lots of other kids who don't. And so I think sometimes when I look at what makes the ultimate classroom, is that I don't always see it in four walls. I see it as, you know, like, yes, you can utilize this space. And I would like to see it, I would feel like more, you know, more sharing, more talking, more like this, rather than like, okay, today we're going to learn about covalent bonds, or let's, you know, spend some time with inertia. And where, you know, there are lots of different ways to actually look at what kids need to know and to tap into that. But I do feel like, you know, getting out more, you know, like you don't have to be out, you know, all the time, but that there are multiple ways to actually be able to show what you know. That it is not always, you know, it's not always write a 5-paragraph essay, or it's not, you know, answer these multiple choice questions, or do this, that there's just lots of different ways. And to be able to sit down sometimes and chat with people, or to do something, you know, like a video recording, like these are the things that I actually learned, to be able to go through those. And so I think that just pushing the limits of what's possible, I think sometimes in learning is, you know, is way more fun. One of the classes that we used to have here was kind of an integrated, like, biology, environmental science class. We call it regional environmental science. It was taught by 2 people, which meant that we could have almost up to 50 kids in the class, and we often did. There were some waitlisted kids, but we took 13 field trips during the year, and we learned all about environmental science in our region. So anytime we actually wanted to do things, so we wanted to learn about why different things actually grow in different areas, we went on field trips in like a prairie, a wetland, a woodland, and, you know, took all sorts of different readings. And then what about these readings, or these datas, or the pictures or sketches of plants that you would actually see, that like, why would we actually see those there? When we talked about land use, like we used to partner with the park district, and when Creek Bend actually went in and that nature center went in, our students met with the park district and the city of St. Charles, and they all came in and listened to our kids actually present for what that area should look like. And we worked with some of those. Creek Bend across the road used to have signage before they did a brand new signage kind of throughout their paths, and we planted native plants over there, and we did, you know, like all of their professional signs we got to actually design. And so we don't do that anymore, but I kind of wish some of that would come back in, because that, you know, for some kids, maybe not for every kid, but for some kids, I think that experience, and like not always having to be tied to a desk or computer, is, you know, is kind of a fun way to actually be able to learn. So, or, to go on trips or to see things that, you've seen on the internet or in a book, but, when you actually get to see them in real life or interact with them in real life, it's, it's entirely different, so.
Neat. So what I'm hearing is more field trips.
Yeah, well,
Awesome.
I am a fan of field trips, so
Yeah.
field trips with a purpose. So, and so that is,
Cool. Yeah, that makes
maybe
sense.
it'll be the future. So we'll actually
That would be
see.
neat.
So, yep,
Because it gets students more in the actual space of where things are going on.
Yes,
And it's
or-
a much better learning environment probably than.
yep. We don't have to try to recreate it within our walls. We can actually take kids to where it's happening and, let them learn from something that, they could go and visit potentially anytime.
Okay. Was becoming a teacher what you expected it to be, and if not, what did you expect? Like, did it kind of live up to your expectations when you decided, I want to be an educator?
I think it's kind of changed over time, like we talked about before. I never thought I was going to be a teacher. So my mom and my grandmother were both teachers, and in fact, I told my mother I would never be a teacher because I didn't have enough patience to actually to be able to handle it. I thought I would go to pharmacy school and then use it to pay my way through med school, so that when you went to the doctor and you needed medicine, you didn't have to go to like a Walgreens or a CVS. Like, you could just fill it right there in the doctor's office and walk out. That was my grand plan. Chemistry kind of got in the way of that. And there's, I got to a point where, biochemistry was probably way more exciting than looking at mechanisms for how different medications actually worked. And so I actually was in a zoology class, and we were kind of looking at how something worked. And my study group couldn't figure it out. We all kind of were frustrated with it. We went home and they were like, let's just see if we can try and figure it out, on our own. And so the next day we came back together. Everybody was kind of presenting. And I said, I kind of see it this way. And I had a map with different pictures and a flow chart for how it worked. And they're like, this is really cool. And one of the kids who was in my group said, do you have any more classes this afternoon? And I was like, nope, I'm done for the day. That was my last one. And he goes, there's somebody I think you need to meet. And I was like, okay. So I'm basically just following him along. We go into Van Allen Hall, which is the University of Iowa, up to this thing, walk into this huge office. This guy knocks on the door. He goes, hey, can I talk to you about what just happened? So he basically replays this. And he goes, I really think that Natalie would be great for our science education program. And I look at him, I have no idea what's happening or anything like that. And it's on a Wednesday afternoon, and he's like, I think it would be great. He goes, all she needs to do is take and pass the GRE, and the last one for the year before grad school would actually start is this Saturday. So I ended up actually taking the GRE, getting the scores that I needed, and I stayed at Iowa to do it. And the guy whose office I actually walked into, as well as his buddy who's right next door that I also that are two extremely well-versed people in the world of science education. They're two of the best people, and I had no idea, but that is when I started actually looking at wow, this is how kids learn. I was just a kid who went to school. I love school, and I did pretty well in it, but I never really realized that there's a way to actually look at how different people learn. And that, obviously not everybody loves school and that, but it was, I think it was fun. My first job was in a very tiny school, probably about 2 hours from here. There were 134 kids in the high school. I was their science teacher. I walked in their chemistry lab. The chemicals were arranged alphabetically. which is never something that you actually want to do with your chemicals. It works really nice, but it's like was not
Too many
great.
chemicals close
Right.
to each other, yeah.
Yeah, and so my first year, I was there for 2 years. I taught biology, like basically what would be like AP bio, chemistry. Didn't teach physics because the math teacher actually taught that, and then I taught pre-algebra and coached cheerleading. So it was, and it's basically like a small farm town.
Yeah.
And it was, it was really fun, but there was no one who, was there to actually bounce ideas off of. And things that I had actually learned about the ways that kids learn best. Like the idea that you can have kids who are by themselves, kids who are in groups, kids who like might be down the hall actually doing something, is also not what the school was ready for. The school was, they wanted, write on the chalkboard and, have them read in the book and do these kind of things. And so there were a whole host of factors that were actually there. But then the Friday before, like the next school year was starting, I got a call to actually come and interview in St. Charles, and I did. And then I moved to St. Charles. It was nice, but like it took a while for me to actually get here. And then I taught what is St. Charles High School, now St. Charles East High School, and then moved to North when it actually opened. And I think, I know teaching is evolving. I think that, every year I come in and I learn a ton of new stuff. People are always like, I cannot imagine teaching the same thing over and over again. I'm like, you never teach the same thing twice because the kids are all different and their needs are different. And so the material is going to be similar, but the way in which you actually teach it and the way that kids actually experience it will be entirely different. And I think that that's kind of, that's kind of the cool thing. And it's, at least so far, kept me coming back year after year to be able to look at it. So, and to do new things. So the only class I haven't taught, I think, other than the electives, is physics. And so, I have a couple years left, so we'll see if we can get some physics classes in there before I go.
Yeah.
So, but being a teacher is, it has been involved. I think the hardest part out of that whole span was actually COVID. So, when, I think that like getting to see the kids was awesome, but there was a class that I actually taught where I sat in a room, in here, like I sat in 460 by myself for 70 minutes on a computer screen, and no one was even in the room because everybody was at home.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is so not what science actually is. Like no chemicals, no labs, like everything takes, like go find these things and like let's see. And we were just on, that was probably the worst stretch out of it. Some fun times too, but like I don't know, interacting with people is definitely the way to go.
What is something you would tell Dr. Rosin when she just graduated high school or college? That one's a tough one too.
It's also a really good one. I would say that you don't have to have it all figured out. 8th grade, Dr. Rosin, like that, like going to pharmacy school, going to med school, like that was my grand plan. I had great science teachers through middle school and even in high school. They were all good and helped in lots of different ways. But the plan is not where I am. So, and that I feel like that's okay. And it's also, even though it can be like kind of scary and weird sometimes, and you're not really quite sure like what's going to happen, something will, and hopefully it's, it kind of gets you to where you eventually will end up. And I feel like sometimes in school, it looks like we have it all figured out. And, and probably some of us do more than others. But I think that's kind of, I don't know, at least that's kind of at least cool part, at least of part of my job, is trying to be able to help kids who are in my classes or help kids who are actually in the school or clubs or whatever, kind of figure out at least maybe where you'd like to start. Is that in the trades? Is that, defending our country? Is that, going to some big 4-year, university or college? And who really knows what that is? But also, I think kind of showing yourself some grace. So along the way, and I think that, there's a lot of kids who do well in school. There are a lot of kids who don't do well in school, but I feel like, high school is a series of experiences that is going to get you from where you are eventually to where you want to be, hopefully. Like, that's the grand plan. But I think the time frame for what that is different for every single person. And that, kind of a zig where there should be a zag along the path makes it a little bit more interesting sometimes. So maybe it's not like that straight line that you hope for, like, this is where I want to go. But now, that I've been a teacher for such a long time, I can't imagine doing anything else. I can't. So that would be, would I go back and actually learn more stuff? I probably would, just because I'm actually interested in it, but I wouldn't sign myself up for going in to see patients every day. Kids are a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So, and just like people, they come with all sorts of different, hopes and dreams and problems and all of that kind of stuff. But you're working on figuring out who you're going to be. And that's kind of a cool thing to do. And if we get to play, like, just even a little part in that, I don't know. And that's, for me, that's what gets me up in the morning. So, yeah.
Neat.
Yeah, don't worry about, figuring it all out. And the idea that, there's grades and there's test scores and all that other kind of stuff. Give it time and your life will be replaced with so much more than what all of that stuff actually happens to be. So you'll get to a point where you won't care about it at all. When you're in high school, yep, you're probably going to care about it a lot. But, no one asks you as an adult, what your grades were here or what your GPA was. So they just want to get to know you as a person.
Yeah.
So, yep.